Use the job descriptions as a management tool. Have them in place to start a path of developing the documentation. Even if you didn't have all the documentation done, this simple way to use a job description is still an effective management tool. It's still useful. I mean, even if I didn't have any of the documentation done in here, at least I have a list of what they're supposed to be doing, and I can discuss that with them. The more you talk about it, the more thought that goes into it, the easier it is to document anyway. So develop a plan to get the documentation down, and then use the job description as a management tool. Every week, a manager should be in looking at the job descriptions of their subordinate positions. It's their job to make sure all of these people are getting their results. And if those results are achieved by documented processes, then they can't be a manager without it. So every week, all the time, they should be looking through these job descriptions, working with the employees on them, striving to get all the documentation done, having these one-on-one meetings, discussing every process, retraining, deciding how it could be better. You can see, or hopefully you can hear, by just having that simple focus, the manager will be more successful. So if a manager is having these one-on-one meetings with their employees every week, every 2 weeks, even every month, and in those meetings they're going through each process on a job description, they're talking about each one, what are they doing well, what are they not doing well, working to get the documentation done. This is happening for a whole year. Then we get to the end of the year, and it's time for our performance review. So there's a process in the library for performance reviews, which I think is fantastic. And basically, this process describes how to create a performance review based on the job description in TouchStone. So it gives you these evaluation forms, and then you literally cut and paste the processes right into them. And there's it shows you, there's even a little video in here on export the job description to Word, you highlight the whole thing, paste it into the document, and then, or you can even paste it into the form tool. Here's one right here as an example. So here are the processes from the job description, referrals. So the job description, or the performance review, becomes a rating on the job description, all the processes. And that makes sense, right? So all throughout the year, we're meeting on those processes. We're talking about how they're doing, how they could be better, innovating, retraining, redocumenting. And then at the end of the year, we're looking back at that whole year and saying, how did this employee do overall? How are they doing on the referral process? How are they doing on cold calling? Every employee deserves a performance review at the end of the year. They just do. It's not, management is not working if your employees aren't getting performance reviews. And the performance reviews need to be tangible. They need to be something that as a manager I can stand behind and say, this is why I gave you a 2. It's not some vague, this is how I was feeling today, so you're below average. Concretely, this is why I gave you a 2. All throughout the year, we've been talking about getting your conversion rate up to 50%. We've been focusing on this. We did X, Y, and Z with it, and I have all this in my employee one-on-one agenda forms. At the end of the year, you're still not there. I think I still have faith that you can get there, but you're not there. That's why you have a 2. I think the thing that managers hate about performance reviews is they are so subjective when you don't have processes in place. It's difficult to create one. You feel kind of yucky about it because either you just go overboard and give everyone excellent performance reviews, and then you're trying to justify your answers when you really don't remember, or it's just too hard to look back and see what the progress of the employee was because you didn't document any of it. These types of job descriptions make it very easy. You know, when I do these, it's like I know what's happened with that employee all year, and it's very concrete because it's specifically related to the processes. So it takes like maybe 20 minutes to fill these out. And what's even better about it is the employee is not surprised. Like, they know already because we've already talked about it. We talked about it the week before. We've been talking about it all year. So there's no surprises. And they're happy, or at least they understand what the ratings mean and what they're there for. So you can download this process from the library. It does also have, like general factors like this. And you may have some of these on other templates that you have, but this is kind of good to look at the end of the year, how dependable. And you could go back to, the employee lateness process, or if you're using the verbal and written warnings, or anything like that. So you can do some general factors. And then there's, things for how could management be more effective, things that information you want to get from the employee, what the goals are for the next year. So there are general factors here that you can put into your performance review. But really the heart of it is this. It's the evaluation of the processes. So this can also be done in the control panel, just like everything else. So here's that performance evaluations process. I can go down and call up this form. So this is a blank form now, and these fields are all live. And then when you save it, it'll save this form back to TouchStone. Once it's saved, I can print it or export it to Word if I want to give it to the employee. But more importantly, it's saved in TouchStone. So even if I wanted to go back and look at the evaluation folder from last year, it's right here in this completed folder. I could just run a report and say, give me give me all the performance reviews for Bob, and I can see them for the last 5 years. And it's all inside of TouchStone. Another thing that's great about doing these performance evaluation forms inside of TouchStone, as well as those meeting agenda forms, and this happens all the time here, and I'm sure it happens in your business too. My manager, who's the president, this is my demo account, so it isn't real, but as it's structured here, the president may want to know what's happening over here, what's happening in this department. Did the manager do all the reviews? What are they discussing this week? How is this new salesperson that was hired 2 months ago doing? So the president can go and run a report and say, a management review report for the manager himself or for the specific employees, and say, okay, here's John. Let me see what's been happening with his sales to-do lists. Let me see what's been happening with his one-on-one meetings. So the information flow is great, because rather than the president knocking on this person's door and saying, did you do your reviews? So how's it going with Bob? So what have you been discussing this week? And are you on track? They can go and look. They can look at the agenda forms that I've filled out here. They can look at the performance reviews that I've done and see what's happening in the department, more or less. So going back to the beginning, build all your job descriptions by linking processes. Have a nice list of what each position is accountable for. Start a plan for the documentation if you haven't already. Put these in order of priority. Decide who's going to document them. Start to put in due dates. And then more importantly, get yourself or your managers to start using the job descriptions right away in some form or another. You can do this employee one-on-one meeting process where all you do is ask them, have a meeting once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks. Plan out when the meetings are going to happen. Have a meeting with each employee. Sit down with them and go through the job description and talk about how those processes are going. Train them in what they need to be trained in. Discuss the documentation. Work on the documentation for that matter. But every 2 weeks, every month, go through those processes and talk about them. Start to train your managers and yourself to use these processes as management tools. It's going to bring all of them to life. It's going to highlight the deficits. It's going to make sure that they're up to date all the time. So start a process by which the managers are using these job descriptions as management tools. Then think about the performance review process. If you know your reviews are coming up, or you don't have a process in place at all, you've never done reviews, think about implementing this, because it just kind of closes the circle on it all. You're using these tools and processes, you're talking about them, you're training, and at the end of the year, you're evaluating. Any questions? I've got a few questions I'm going to answer offline, but does anyone have any questions about anything we've talked about? No? Next week, we're going to start to discuss how to document. So get to a place, if you can, spend the hours that it's going to take between now and the next training session, or this next Thursday, to build at least one job description. Try to get to the result of building all your job descriptions if you can. Then we're going to discuss documenting, how to document. So we're going to go into a process, and I'm going to first talk about how to build work plans and checklists. That's going to be the first session. I'm going to talk about technically how to build them in TouchStone, but I'm going to also give some strategic information on what a good process looks like. What are some protocols for documenting? What are the best ways to document? And how to use these two tools effectively. The following week, we're going to cover the rest of the tools, so it's going to go in 2 sections. If you have employees that you want them to learn to document in TouchStone, or even not in TouchStone, next week would be a good time to pull them onto the training session, or at least let them listen to the recording. And they don't need to know how to do everything in TouchStone. Really all they need to know how to do is go to the org chart, access their job description, and build work plans, build checklists. So it would be a good time to bring anyone that you want to train on board. Someone's asking, how do you download from the library? So in case anyone else has the same question. Every function has its own library. So this has a library for strategic and managerial processes. This function has a library for everything related to marketing, advertising, and sales. This has a library related to operations, production, service, delivering products or services. And this has a library related to admin, finance, HR, IT. So go to the function and go up here where it says Add from Process Library. Most TouchStone users will have a general process library, and then you have access to these 2 industry-specific libraries. If you have a coach or what we call reseller, someone who you purchase TouchStone through, you may have a 3rd or 4th library, because a lot of our resellers will have their own libraries. So if you see multiple libraries, you probably recognize either like your business mentor or whoever turns you onto TouchStone, you'll see their library. But for the most part, you want to go to this general library. So here I'm seeing a list of all the processes from the library. Some of these are grayed out because these are already in my account. So if you see a process that you want from the library, you select it. You go up here and say which subfunction you want that process in, and then you just hit Save at the bottom. So you can pull multiple processes at a time if you want, but just know that you can only choose one subfunction to put them in. But you can obviously reorder them. You can drag and drop to the different subfunctions. So that's how you add from the library. Here's that process I just added. If you delete a library process, so say you pull a process and then you decide you don't want it, or you don't want it right away, you delete all the tools inside of it, it'll turn red, and then you can drag it to the delete folder right here and delete it. It will then put it back into the library. So once you pull a process over, if you decide you don't want it, delete it, it goes back into the library, and then you can pull it down later if you want. So the library processes are fantastic. They're a good way to kind of get a head start. They do need to be customized, though. You do need to go into them and actually make them your own. And I think the number one thing, in addition to how to use the library, that I want to say is don't just pull everything over because you're all excited about it. Really make sure that you take what you know you're going to document and use within, say, 6 months. If you don't think you're going to get to documenting it and you're not sure you're really going to use it because it's not that big of a priority right now, leave it in the library. Delete it, put it back into the library, and go get it later. Because the last thing you want to do is download everything and then just have it sitting there cluttering up your system and making it more confusing than it needs to be. Okay, so next time we're going to talk specifically about how to document the process, starting with work plans and checklists. And thanks for coming, everybody. For those of you who have questions that I haven't answered, I'm going to answer those right now. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.